In Texas, you can openly carry a handgun without a permit. In California, buying a handgun means waiting 10 days for a background check. Meanwhile, in New York, owning certain rifles can get you arrested. Why is there such a drastic difference in gun laws across America? The answer lies in the country's unique history, political landscape, and deep-rooted debate over the Second Amendment. At the heart of the gun law debate is the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, ratified in 1791. It states, "A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed." But here's the problem. What does that really mean? Some argue it means individuals have an absolute right to own firearms. Others say it only applies to organized militias. This fundamental disagreement has led to wildly different gun laws across the country. Over the centuries, the U.S. Supreme Court has weighed in multiple times, often shifting the legal interpretation. One of the most notable cases was District of Columbia versus Heller in 2008, where the court ruled that individuals have a constitutional right to own firearms for self-defense, separate from militia service. But even after that ruling, states still have leeway in regulating guns within their borders. Other landmark rulings, like McDonald versus Chicago in 2010, further strengthened individual gun rights by applying the Second Amendment to state and local governments. However, the courts have also upheld certain restrictions, proving that while gun ownership is a right, it is not an unlimited one. Gun control has a long history in the United States. Even during the early years of the nation, laws were passed to regulate firearms. In the 19th century, many cities required individuals to check their guns at the town limits. Even the Wild West wasn't as lawless as people think. Tombstone, Arizona, for example, had an ordinance requiring visitors to surrender their firearms upon entering town. Similarly, Dodge City and Deadwood enforced strict gun control measures to maintain public order. The United States is a federal system, meaning both the national government and individual states have lawmaking power. When it comes to guns, federal laws set the baseline, but states can add their own restrictions or lack thereof. That's why buying a firearm in Montana looks completely different from buying one in Massachusetts. For example, federal law bans felons from owning guns, requires background checks for licensed gun dealers, and restricts fully automatic weapons. However, it does not regulate things like magazine capacity, waiting periods, or the open carry of firearms. These are all left up to the states. This system has led to stark contrasts. In Vermont, for example, residents have been able to carry concealed firearms without a permit for decades. But just next door in Massachusetts, gun owners must obtain multiple licenses and go through extensive background checks. Meanwhile, in Illinois, there's a strict process to own a gun, but cross into neighboring Indiana, and you'll find much looser regulations. This inconsistency means that even though America has many gun laws, there's no single standard across the nation. So, why do some states have super strict gun laws while others barely regulate them at all? It largely comes down to three factors: culture, crime, and politics. In rural states like Wyoming or Kentucky, guns are deeply tied to culture hunting, self-defense, and even just a way of life. Many people grow up around firearms and see them as essential tools rather than dangerous weapons. There's less support for strict laws because many residents believe gun ownership is a fundamental right that should not be restricted by the government. Meanwhile, in urban states like New York or California, high population density and gun violence lead to stricter laws. Lawmakers argue that more regulation means fewer crimes, and they often look to other countries like Japan or the UK, where strict gun control has resulted in lower gun-related deaths. States with large metropolitan areas tend to have more restrictions, as lawmakers prioritize public safety over individual rights. And of course, politics plays a huge role. Generally, Republican-led states lean towards looser gun laws, while Democratic-led states push for stricter regulations. The divide has become even sharper in recent years, with some conservative states passing Second Amendment sanctuary laws to block new gun restrictions, while liberal states have tightened their regulations in response to mass shootings. Over the years, America has seen major gun laws that have shaped the country's landscape. Let's break down the biggest ones. After gangsters like Al Capone terrorized cities with machine guns, the U.S. passed the National Firearms Act in 1934, heavily regulating automatic weapons and sawed-off shotguns. The law imposed taxes and registration requirements on certain firearms, effectively reducing their availability to criminals. Following the assassinations of JFK, Martin Luther King Jr., and Robert Kennedy, Congress passed the Gun Control Act of 1968, setting age restrictions and banning gun sales to criminals. This law also introduced the requirement for gun dealers to obtain federal licenses and prohibited firearm sales to individuals with a history of mental illness. In the 1990s, mass shootings led to a ban on assault weapons, but it expired in 2004, and Congress never renewed it. The effects of this lapse remain heavily debated to this day. Studies suggest that while the ban was in place, mass shooting incidents were fewer, but opponents argue that criminals would have found alternative ways to obtain weapons regardless. More recently, in 2022, Congress passed the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the first major federal gun reform in decades. It expanded background checks for young buyers, encouraged states to adopt red flag laws, and closed the so-called boyfriend loophole by preventing domestic abusers from owning guns. Yet, many argue it didn't go far enough to address rising gun violence. Today, the battle over gun laws is fiercer than ever. The Supreme Court has recently struck down strict gun restrictions in some states, ruling in favor of broader gun rights. Meanwhile, new mass shootings keep reigniting the debate. Some states are enacting stronger laws, while others are removing restrictions altogether. The debate over gun laws has even extended to new and emerging firearm technology. The rise of ghost guns, unregistered, privately assembled firearms has created another legal challenge. These homemade guns are difficult to trace, leading to new regulations attempting to control their production. And then there are red flag laws rules that allow authorities to temporarily remove firearms from individuals deemed a danger to themselves or others. Some states have embraced these laws as a way to prevent tragedies before they happen, while others see them as a violation of due process rights. At the end of the day, America's gun laws will likely remain a complex, ever-changing puzzle. The fight between safety and freedom isn't going away anytime soon. The U.S. stands at a crossroads. Will future laws tighten restrictions nationwide, or will the divide between states continue to grow? Only time will tell. So, what do you think? Should America have stricter federal gun laws, or should states continue making their own rules? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into America's biggest questions. See you next time.